to be or not to be. It's arguably the most famous line in English literature, isn't it? A question that's just echoed through centuries.
Mm-hmm. And countless minds.
Exactly. And it comes from this one man who, you could argue, almost single-handedly shaped, well, our language and our whole theatrical tradition.
That's right.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into the life, the work, the enduring legacy of that man, William Shakespeare.
And our mission really is to give you, our listener, a bit of a shortcut. To get truly well-informed about the bard. We've waded through, well, a mountain of sources to try and cut through all the noise.
Pulling out the key stuff.
Exactly. The important nuggets, those real aha moments about this literary giant.
And what a giant. I mean, think about it. Nearly 40 plays, 154 sonnets, those big narrative poems.
Incredible.
And his work is still performed more often than any other playwrights. Translated into, every major language?
Pretty much, yeah. The insight there isn't just the sheer volume, though, is it? It's that he tapped into something so fundamentally human.
Right. That's why the stories still land, centuries later, across cultures.
Absolutely. And for a bit of fascinating trivia, that detail about him being born and dying on the same date, April 23rd.
Yeah. It's almost too perfect.
It is. It's those kinds of poetic details that make his story so compelling, even with all the surprising gaps in his life story.
Okay, let's get into that. Because we think of Shakespeare as this, monumental figure, almost mythical.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a real person, born in Stratford-upon-Avon. His father, John Shakespeare, was a glover, pretty successful, an alderman even.
And his mother, Mary Arden, came from a more affluent landowning family.
Now, that birth date, April 23rd, 1564, that's the tradition, right? But the only actual record is his baptism.
That's correct. His baptism on April 26th is what we have documented. That April 23rd date, well, it's just so neat because it matches his death date in 1616.
Creates that perfect symmetry.
Exactly. It fits the narrative for someone whose life felt, almost divinely structured, even if it's based more on tradition than hard fact.
It's amazing how much is pieced together. What about his education? King's New School in Stratford. We don't have attendance records, but...
No, we don't. But it was a free school, provided a really intensive classical education, heavy on Latin. And yeah, most biographers, they pretty much agree he likely ended there.
Okay.
It sort of highlights how history gets written, doesn't it? This collaborative guesswork, scholars agreeing on probabilities even with sparse evidence, just to build a picture.
That collaborative part is fascinating. And yet, even with all that effort, the gaps are still huge. His personal life, for instance. He married Anne Hathaway when he was just 18.
Yeah, and she was 26 and pregnant at the time.
Ah. And the marriage bans, those public announcements, they were only read once, not the usual 3 times.
Right, which definitely suggests some urgency, a need to formalize things quickly, probably because of the pregnancy.
Makes sense. And they had 3 children, Susanna, and then twins.
Hamnet and Judith, yeah. But tragically, little Hamnet died when he was only 11.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that must have left a huge mark on him.
Yeah.
I have to think.
Absolutely. Which leads us to those famous lost years, that gap, 7 years, 1585 to 1592, where he just vanishes from the records.
It's endlessly captivating, isn't it?
It really is. What are some of the theories, the stories that popped up?
Oh, they fueled centuries of imagination. You got these apocryphal stories. His first biographer, Nicholas Rowe, suggested he fled Stratford because he got caught poaching deer from a local bigwig, Sir Thomas Lucy.
Right, the deer poaching story.
That's the classic one. Others claimed he, started out minding horses for theater patrons in London. Or maybe he was a country schoolmaster somewhere.
A schoolmaster.
Yeah, there's even a theory from the 20th century that he might have worked for a Catholic landowner and went by the name William Shakespeare.
Shakespeare, wow.
I know. The fact these stories persist just shows how much we want to fill in that blank, To understand how he got from Stratford to the London stage.
It's incredible. The greatest writer in the language, and this big blank slate in his biography. But then, bang, he reappears in London, and it's dramatic. Sometime between 85 and 92, he starts writing. His plays are up and running by 1592.
And we know this largely because of this pretty nasty attack in print by a rival playwright, Robert Greene.
Ah, yes, the upstart crow.
That's the one. Greene, in his groat's worth of wit, really lays into him, calls him an upstart crow, beautified with our feathers, a tiger's heart wrapped in a player's hide.
Ouch.
And he even makes that pun, calling him the only shake scene in a country.
Shake scene.
Yeah, it clearly shows that by 92, Shakespeare wasn't just known, He was seen as, well, getting too big for his boots.
Yeah.
Maybe overreaching the university-educated writers like Greene.
So one guy's bitter review becomes like proof of genius for history.
Yeah.
What made him an upstart, though? Was it just the talent, or was he doing something different, disruptive?
Probably a bit of both. See, a lot of the established playwrights then had university degrees, the university wits they were sometimes called. Shakespeare, despite what was likely a very good grammar school education, didn't have that university background. So his rapid success, well, it probably felt like an intrusion to them. Someone without the right credentials muscling in.
Right. So Greene's attack, ironically, is actually some of the best early proof we have of Shakespeare's rising star.
Exactly. It tells us he was making waves.
And after that, his career just takes off. After 1594, his plays were pretty much exclusively performed by one company.
Yes, the Lord Chamberlain's Men. And crucially, he wasn't just writing for them. He was a part owner, a shareholder in the company.
Ah, so he had skin in the game.
Absolutely. And they quickly became the top playing company in London. After Queen Elizabeth died in 1603, the new king, James I, gave them a royal patent. They became the King's Men.
The King's Men. Nice upgrade.
Definitely. And this wasn't just about art. It was serious business. They were entrepreneurs. In 1599, the company actually built their own theater.
The Globe.
The famous Globe, right on the south bank of the Thames. And later, in 1608, they took over the Blackfriars Indoor Theater, too.
So they had a winter venue and a summer venue. Smart.
Very smart. It gave them immense control, artistically and financially.
And it made Shakespeare a wealthy man. He bought New Place, which was, what, the second biggest house in Stratford?
That's right, in 1597. And later, in 1605, he made this other really savvy investment in parish tithes.
Tithes. Explain that for us.
Well, essentially, he bought the right to collect a share of the local church taxes, things like grain, hay, that sort of thing, from a large area around Stratford. It was a steady, reliable income stream, a very shrewd move.
So a writer, an actor, and a businessman.
Absolutely. And he kept acting, too. We know Ben Jonson listed him in the cast for some of his own plays.
Right. Any famous roles he's linked to?
Well, there's a strong tradition, though, not definitively proven, that he played the ghost in his own Hamlet.
No way. That's brilliant.
Isn't it? And maybe Adam in As You Like It, or the chorus in Henry V. Smallish parts, probably, but he was on the boards.
Just imagine that. The greatest writer of the age stepping onto the stage, saying lines he probably wrote himself. How do you think that being both writer and actor shaped his plays?
Oh, it must have been fundamental. I mean,
Right.
being an actor gives you this incredibly practical, hands-on understanding of what works on stage.
Right. The rhythm, the pacing.
Exactly. How lines sound when spoken, how actors move, how you hold an audience's attention. That practical stagecraft surely fed directly back into his writing. It's probably why his plays feel so inherently theatrical, not just like literature.
That makes total sense. So he's juggling this London career with his life back in Stratford, buying property there.
Yeah, he seems to have divided his time. We know he lodged in various places in London over the years.
But then around 1613, things seem to slow down. Fewer plays.
Yes, his output definitely decreased after about 1610. His last 3 plays were actually collaborations, most likely with John Fletcher, who eventually succeeded him as the house playwright for the King's Men.
And he retired just before? Wasn't there something dramatic that happened right after?
There was. The Globe Theatre burned down. Tragically, in 1613, during a performance of Henry VIII, one of those collaborations, canon effect gone wrong, apparently.
Yeah. Talk about timing.
Yeah. And it's also worth remembering the context of the plague. The bubonic plague forced London theaters to close frequently throughout his career. That made acting work unpredictable. So this idea of a neat retirement might be a bit different from how we see it now.
Right, it wasn't just clocking out. Okay, so his life gives us the man, the context. But it's the works, the plays and poems that make him immortal. Let's dive into that incredible evolution. He starts with, what, comedies and histories?
That's generally the early phase, yes. Plays like Richard III, the Henry VI trilogy, often drawing material from historical sources like Holinshed's Chronicles, early comedies too.
And then the big ones.
Then come the great tragedies. Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, generally seen as the absolute peak of his dramatic art.
What was so revolutionary about them?
Well, they really deepened the idea of tragedy. It wasn't just about fate or external forces anymore. It was often about a central, fatal flaw within the hero himself.
Like Hamlet's indecision.
Exactly. Or Lear's pride and rash judgment. This psychological depth, exploring the inner landscape of the characters that was groundbreaking.
And squeezed in between, in the mid-1590s, we get those fantastic romantic comedies. A Midsummer Night's Dream.
The Merchant of Venice, though, we should acknowledge, Shylock's portrayal is definitely viewed through a different, more critical lens today, reflecting the anti-Semitism of the time.
True, and Much Ado About Nothing, Twelfth Night, just brilliant stuff.
Absolutely. Then later you get the so-called problem plays.
Problem plays, like Measure for Measure.
Yes, and Troilus and Cressida, all's well that ends well. They're harder to categorize, tonally complex, morally ambiguous. They sort of defy easy labels.
And then his final phase.
His last period brings us the tragic comedies, or sometimes called romances, like The Winter's Tale and The Tempest. They have a graver feel than the earlier comedies, but they move towards reconciliation, forgiveness in the end. It shows this incredible arc, this range he developed over his career.
But it wasn't just plays. He was a poet, too. Those narrative poems.
Right, Venus and Adonis and The Rape of Lucrece. Written, interestingly, probably during periods when the theaters were closed because of the plague.
Ah, making good use of the downtime.
Yeah, seems like it. They were dedicated to his patron, the Earl of Southampton, and heavily influenced by the Roman poet Ovid.
And then, of course, the sonnets. All 154 of them.
Published in 1609, though likely written earlier, possibly circulated privately among friends.
And they're famous for these sort of contrasting themes.
Yeah, they're usually seen as falling into two main groups. One series seems to detail this intense, perhaps uncontrollable desire for a married woman, the Dark Lady. And the other expresses this deeply complex, conflicted love for a young man, the fair youth. Whether these were real people or literary constructs or autobiographical, well, that's been debated for centuries.
It adds that layer of mystery. But the lines themselves, shall I compare thee to A Summer's Day? From Sonnet 18, it's just timeless.
It really is. And the dedication doesn't help clear things up. It's dedicated to a Mr. W.H. as the only begetter of the poems.
And nobody knows for sure who Mr. W.H. was.
Nope. Still a major puzzle for scholars. Loads of theories, of course, but no definitive answer.
Fascinating. And those sonnets, that language, it leads us into his style generally, because he wasn't just telling stories, he was revolutionizing how stories were told in English.
Absolutely. His early plays sometimes used a more formal rhetorical style.
Yeah.
Very patterned. But he quickly evolved. He mastered blank verse, that's the unrhymed iambic pentameter.
The sort of heartbeat rhythm. 10 syllables per line, mostly unstressed and stressed.
Exactly. Dot dum dot dum dot dum dot dum dot dum. It became the standard for English drama. But Shakespeare didn't just use it. He played with it. He broke the monotony.
Oh, so?
By varying the rhythm, using pauses within line caesuras, running sentences over line breaks, and changing sentence structures. It made the verse incredibly flexible, powerful. Think of Julius Caesar or Hamlet.
You can almost hear the character's thoughts breaking through the form. Like Hamlet saying, "Sir, in my heart there was a kind of fighting that would not let me sleep."
Precisely. That irregularity conveys the inner turmoil. And later, in tragedies like Macbeth, he used these dense, almost elliptical metaphors, forcing the audience to connect the dots.
Challenging them.
Yes. And his late romances, like The Tempest, achieved this amazing feeling of spontaneity through really varied sentence lengths and structures. But underpinning it all was this incredibly practical sense of theater. He knew how to adapt sources, how to structure plots with multiple points of interest to keep an audience hooked. That's key to why they still work so well on stage.
And they definitely have endured. Okay, so Shakespeare the man. He dies on April 23rd, 1616, back to that symmetrical date, aged 52.
And intriguingly, his will, which he signed just about a month before his death, described him as being in perfect health.
So the cause of death is unknown.
Officially, yes. Although decades later, the local vicar in Stratford, a man named John Ward, wrote in his diary that Shakespeare, Ben Jonson, and another writer, Michael Drayton, had a merry meeting where they drank too much, and Shakespeare caught a fever afterwards and died.
Died after a party with his writer buddies. What a story. Believable.
Who knows? It's secondhand, written long after the fact.
Yeah.
But it's a good story.
It is. Now, the will itself is famous for one particular, rather odd bequest, isn't it?
Yes. He left the bulk of his pretty substantial estate to his elder daughter, Susanna, but to his wife, Anne Hathaway.
He leaves.
His second best bet.
The second best bet. Okay, this has fueled endless speculation, right? Was it an insult or something else?
Oh, endlessly. Some scholars see it as a deliberate slight, maybe suggesting their marriage was strained or distant by them.
That's the common reading, I think.
It is. But others argue, well, the best bet. in a prosperous household was often kept in the guest room, reserved for visitors. The second best bed would likely have been the actual marital bed.
Ah. So it could have been a sentimental gesture, something personal between them.
It's possible. It's just one of those tiny details that tells you more about how we want to read history than about what actually happened. It invites interpretation.
Definitely. And he's buried in Holy Trinity Church in Stratford with that famous curse on his gravestone.
Yes. Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear, to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones.
And nobody's dared move them since.
Apparently not. Even during church renovations in 2008, they were very careful to respect the curse.
Wise move. Okay, connecting this to the bigger picture then.
Yeah.
His influence starts almost immediately, right? With the first folio in 1623.
Absolutely crucial moment. Published by his former acting colleagues, John Hemingway and Henry Condell, it collected 36 of his plays, 18 of which had never been printed before.
So without it, we might have lost Macbeth, Twelfth Night, The Tempest.
Exactly. Half his plays, basically. And it included that preface by Ben Jonson with the famous line declaring Shakespeare was not of an age, but for all time.
And Johnson was right. How did Shakespeare expand what drama could do?
In almost every way. Character depth, as we mentioned, complexity of plot, the sheer range and power of his language. He pushed boundaries of genre too, like making romance a subject worthy of high tragedy in Romeo and Juliet.
And using soliloquies not just for exposition, but to really delve into a character's inner thoughts, their psychology.
Precisely. That was revolutionary.
And his influence just ripples outward. Literature, obviously. Milton wrote a tribute. Novelists like Hardy, Faulkner, Melville.
Yep, Herman Melville consciously modeled Captain Ahab and Moby Dick partly on King Lear. The influence is profound.
And music.
Oh, thousands of pieces. Over 20,000, apparently. Mendelssohn's Midsummer Night's Dream, Verdi's great Shakespearean operas, Macbeth, Othello, Falstaff. The list goes on.
Film, too. Kurosawa's amazing adaptations.
Throne of Blood from Macbeth, Ran from King Lear, masterpieces. And Orson Welles, a huge Shakespeare fan, considered his Shakespeare films his best work.
Even psychology. Freud drew on Hamlet for his theories about human nature, the Oedipus complex.
He did. And of course, the English language itself. We use his phrases every day without even thinking about it.
Like with bated breath.
Or foregone conclusion, break the ice, wild goose chase, heart of gold. Hundreds of them are attributed to him, or at least first recorded in his works. He didn't necessarily invent them all, but he popularized them.
He shaped how we speak, and his reach became global very quickly.
Remarkably so. His reception in Germany was huge, very early on. Christoph Martin Mühlen produced the first complete translations of his plays into any language in the 1760s.
Wow, first complete translation anywhere was German.
Yep. And today, well, Guinness World Records lists him as the world's best-selling playwright, and I think the third most translated author ever, after the Bible, and Agatha Christie, maybe. Incredible company.
That's staggering. What about his critical reputation? Was he always seen as the best?
Not universally, no. He was definitely praised in his lifetime. Francis Mears in 1598 called him most excellent among English writers for both comedy and tragedy. But he had critics, too.
Ben Jonson admired him but also had reservations.
Right. Jonson famously said Shakespeare wanted art, meaning he sometimes broke the classical rules of drama, which Jonson valued, and later critics, like Thomas Rhymer in the late 17th century, absolutely slammed him for mixing comedy and tragedy, which Rhymer thought was improper.
But then others loved that mix.
Exactly. John Dryden, a bit later, famously wrote, I admire Jonson, but I love Shakespeare. That captures a shift. By the 18th century, he was becoming enshrined as England's national poet, the Bard of Avon. And his reputation spread internationally, with figures like Voltaire in France and Goethe in Germany really engaging with his work, translating and adapting it.
Then came the Victorians.
Ah, yes. The era of full-blown bardolatry, almost worship, which inevitably led to a backlash. George Bernard Shaw famously critiqued what he saw as outdated thinking in Shakespeare.
But the modernists found something new in him.
They did. People like T.S. Eliot reinterpreted his work, seeing his primitiveness not as a flaw, but as something powerful and modern. And then you get critics like Harold Bloom in the late 20th century making these huge claims like Shakespeare invented the human, or that he was larger than Plato and the St. Augustine.
Wow, so it's this continuous dialogue across centuries. He's constantly being reread, reevaluated.
Exactly. Each generation finds its own Shakespeare.
Which brings us back to the mysteries, because despite everything we know or think we know, there are still these big unanswered questions. The most famous is probably the authorship question.
Right. The idea that maybe William Shakespeare of Stratford wasn't the real author of the plays. These doubts didn't really surface until centuries after his death, mind you.
And people propose other candidates, like Francis Bacon or Christopher Marlowe.
Or Edward de Vere, the Earl of Oxford. He's a popular one now. It has to be said, the vast majority of mainstream academic scholars consider it a fringe theory. The evidence for Shakespeare Stratford is pretty substantial.
But the idea persists, which raises that interesting question you touched on earlier. Why do these mysteries fascinate us so much? Maybe even more than if we had all the answers.
I think the mystery itself is part of the appeal. The gaps allow us to project, to imagine, to keep asking questions. It keeps him alive in a different way.
Makes sense. What other big unknowns are there? His religion.
That's another one. Officially, he lived and died conforming to the Church of England, which was compulsory. But there's circumstantial evidence pointing to possible Catholic sympathies in his family.
Like his mother's family, the Ardens.
Yes, they had strong Catholic ties. And there's a disputed document, supposedly a statement of Catholic faith, found hidden in the rafters of his father's house years later. Plus, his elder daughter Susanna was once cited for missing Easter communion.
Little clues.
Little clues, exactly, but nothing definitive. Proving someone's private beliefs from 400 years ago is incredibly difficult.
And then there's the speculation about his sexuality.
Right, fueled mainly by the sonnets. As we said, some are addressed to a male fair youth in terms of intense love and devotion, interpreted by some as romantic love, by others as passionate friendship, which was expressed differently then.
And then the Dark Lady sonnets seem to suggest heterosexual affairs.
Exactly, so you have evidence pointing in different directions.
Yes.
It reflects a complexity, perhaps, that doesn't fit neatly into modern categories. His work certainly explores the full spectrum of human desire and relationships.
So maybe the answer is, it's complicated.
Probably the best answer we have. And finally, the most basic question. What did he actually look like?
Yeah. Is there any reliable portrait?
It's surprisingly uncertain. There are no descriptions of him written by people who actually knew him. No portrait known to have been commissioned by him during his lifetime.
Really? Nothing.
Our best evidence comes down to two posthumous images. One is the engraving by Martin Droeshout that appears on the title page of the first folio in 1623.
Okay, the famous balding guy with the high forehead and the slightly goofy collar.
That's a one. Ben Jonson seemed to approve of it, so it likely bore some resemblance. The other is the funeral monument erected in Holy Trinity Church in Stratford, probably a few years after his death.
And paintings. There are famous portraits associated with him.
There are, like the Chandos portrait, which is probably the most famous painted image. It has a decent claim, maybe dating from his lifetime, but its provenance is debated. We just don't know for sure what he looked like.
It's kind of a powerful reminder, isn't it, that ultimately the work itself, the words, the plays, they're what truly remain. Maybe they tell us more about his essence than any portrait could.
That's a really profound thought. His work has definitely transcended the specific details of the man. It's become this universal mirror.
So there we have it. We've journeyed through Shakespeare's, well, surprisingly mysterious life in Stratford and London, his incredible rise in the theater world, the amazing evolution of his timeless plays and poems, his absolutely monumental influence across the globe, and those fascinating mysteries that still keep us talking. Hopefully you feel you've got a really solid, nuanced grasp of the immortal bard now.
And I think the key takeaway is that Shakespeare's genius wasn't just static. It wasn't just creating these amazing characters and stories back then. It's how his work continually invites us, generation after generation, to find ourselves, to see our own world reflected in his words. They're constantly being reinterpreted.
So maybe the final thought for you, the listener, is this. Armed with this deeper dive into the man behind the legend, what new meaning, what fresh insight might you uncover the next time you encounter his work?